Hello YouTube. The Elder Scrolls universe is full of fascinating and terrifying creatures, and one of the most memorable creatures by far is the Spriggan. Almost every player has at some points probably found a pretty beautiful spot of nature in one of the games and then found themselves attacked by a Spriggan, which at least to low level players can be a real menace. Now in this video today I want to explore the lore behind Spriggans. What exactly are they, how were they created, and what drives them? I'll attempt to answer those questions and more after the intro. So, Spriggans, forest creatures often seen with tree-like, almost human-like bodies, often with a body that resembles a humanoid female, although they can take on many more different shapes. Now, in essence, Spriggans are nature spirits and are often regarded as nature's guardians by the people of Tamriel. They appear to be completely made out of wood, but they can sometimes be covered in foliage, like leaves and branches as well, and they may also emit light from their bodies. In addition to that, some Spriggans have bugs and insects inhabiting their bodies, like bees and hornets, which they can also use in combat. Their main behavior pattern is that they protect the places of nature where they live, but they are observed to be calm and gentle with most natural creatures that live in the woods, really only being aggressive against travelers who wish harm upon nature and the places that they try to protect. Their relationship with the creatures of the forest is generally very friendly, and forest creatures like bears, foxes and insects will often aid the Spriggans in battle. But it's suggested that this may not be fully out of love for the Spriggans, but rather that the Spriggans may control these forest creatures with their own magic, forcing them to fight along with them. As we have instances where weak Spriggans are fighting with trolls, for example, while stronger Spriggans are defended by trolls, suggesting that they simply control these creatures, as if the Spriggan is stronger, they're able to dominate the troll, while weaker Spriggans can only dominate stuff like foxes. In battle, Spriggans tend to use their long fingers as blades, and they may take a bite with their sharp teeth out of their enemies. They also have the ability to poison living creatures, and they have strong healing powers that make them difficult enemies to put down for good, as their healing powers almost give them a second wind when they were just about to be killed. Now, the color of their bodies is actually different for different Spriggans, with some thinking that the change in color has to do with the environment that they live in and their adaptation to the environment. For example, in Morrowind's Snowy Souls time, we saw very light green, almost white Spriggans. In Skyrim's Green Glades, we see green ones. In volcanic regions, we see red burnt Spriggans. While some people speculate that this may have to do with the seasons, it seems to more have to do with their adaptation to the local environment that they are in. Now, how exactly the Spriggans came into being is as of yet unknown, but a general trend is that most cultures seem to believe that they were created by the gods or goddesses of nature. So it's believed by the Norse of Skyrim, for example, that Spriggans are the creation of the goddess Cain or Kinnereth, while the Bosmers, or the Wood Elves, and the Breton Druids, who think that the god Ifra is the god of nature, believe that nature spirits like Spriggans were all created by him. Meanwhile, according to the legends of the Nordic Skal tribe on Solstheim, Spriggans supposedly came into being when the Allmaker, the mysterious deity that the Skal primarily worship, blew his breath through the lands and trees, creating Spriggans as their guardians. What's interesting here is that the player base often just calls Spriggans forest Atronachs or wood Atronachs due to them looking kinda like forest flame Atronachs, but that's almost certainly not the case. You see, while flame Atronachs and frost Atronachs, for example, are Daedric creatures, which you have to summon from Oblivion, Spriggans seem to be forest spirits, explicitly native to Tamriel, and may even be Aedric creatures if you believe the theories about their creation, which is pretty cool. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Spriggans have some variants and different forms that they can take on. For example, as mentioned earlier, they can appear with several different color schemes, with the regular green Spriggan being the most common, but brown, orange and almost white super mint green and purple bluish variants also existing, with even wilder variants created through corruption. But apart from color differences, the Spriggan can actually come in quite a few different shapes and subspecies, with one of these variants being the Lurcher. Lurchers are made by corrupting a Spriggan with dark magic, which makes them even more powerful and makes them larger, which is why some call them the polluted cousins of Spriggans. Once a Spriggan has assumed the form of a Lurcher, it's said that the nature spirit within is actually corrupted and tortured, and that their spirit remains tortured until they are put down and killed. What's interesting here is that that's apparently not the only way to create a lurcher, as while most methods known of creating lurchers involve some form of dark magic, the forest-loving Bosmer actually create them to protect the forest, but it's suggested that they create lurchers apparently not from Spriggans, but that they grow the husks of lurchers themselves and then imbue them with power. Which is pretty interesting, but a topic for a different video, as lurchers probably deserve their own video at some point. On that point, we also have the Gnarl, a Spriggan-like creature which may have been created in imitation of the Spriggans, or maybe a Daedric prince's corruption of the Spriggan, which also deserves their own video, or at least belong in an Interesting Creatures of the Plains of Oblivion video. But to get back on topic, another trio of variants are the Burnt Spriggan found on Solstheim after the eruption of the Red Mountain in the 4th era and on volcanic regions around Tamriel, and the Spriggan Matron and the Spriggan Earth Mother. Burnt Spriggans are a flaming variant of Spriggan that use destructive flame spells instead of nature magic. They can be found in volcanic regions, and they have a far worse temperament compared to their woodland kin, and when they are close to death they explode with fire. And even though this seems like a regular Spriggan that just got burnt, it seems that this is actually an adaptation variant of the Spriggan, so a variant that adapted to its environment, and not really, a regular Spriggan that somehow got burned, which is pretty interesting. Now, something else that's pretty interesting is that Spriggan Earth Mothers are a more powerful version of the regular Spriggans. They often have a purple coloring and are far better at controlling nature when compared to their lesser kin, with them being able to control very powerful creatures. Spriggan Matrons seem to be a variant more powerful than regular Spriggans, but lesser than the Earth Mothers. The Matrons often have an orange coloring in contrast to the regular green Spriggan and the Earth Mothers that have a purple coloring. What's interesting here is that these titles, like Matron, suggest a hierarchy among Spriggans, and in some cases we can even see a group of Spriggans being led by a Matron or an Earth Mother, which is pretty cool, and suggests a more complex way of life than we actually know about. Now, other than morphing into more powerful variants, Spriggans are also capable of morphing into more animalistic shapes, such as bears and large cats, and on the island of Galen we can find colossal Spriggans. Now, it's unknown if these giant variants of Spriggans are actually native to these islands, or that they can be found in other places, but on Galen there's actually one Spriggan, a really large powerful blue Spriggan, that can give us a clue. That Spriggan is called the Preserver of Galen, and it's said that the Preserver, which is seemingly an ancient colossal Spriggan that wanders the island and seeks to drive out all non-druids from the land, was summoned to protect this land. Its lore states that it was once summoned by the druids, who over the ages forgot how to control it, which is actually quite interesting, and it may mean that the other colossal Spriggans of the island may have also been summoned, or may be offspring of those who were summoned, or may all be offspring of the Preserver of Galen. But unfortunately we just don't know anything more than that. Now, talking about offspring though, several interactions in the games reveal that Spriggans actually procreate through seeds, and that from a seed can grow a new Spriggan. Now, we don't know their reproductive methods, so how they create those seeds, at all. All we know is that they come from seeds, and my personal speculation is that it's likely that the Earth Mothers create the seeds, since, that's why they're probably called Earth Mothers, since they put seeds in the earth. But since Spriggans are spirits and can take on whatever shape that they want to take on, I presume that their reproduction is asexual, especially as there's a side quest in the Elder Scrolls Online which suggests that one Spriggan is enough to repopulate an entire area with them, suggesting that you don't need multiple Spriggans for reproduction, as one Spriggan can seemingly produce the necessary seeds in time. Now, as I said earlier, Spriggans are regarded as nature's guardians, but despite being revered by some people on Tamriel for protecting nature, they often live in secluded places, often beautiful places which they tend to protect against harm, and also protect against those who even revere the Spriggans. They more often than not attack travelers, possibly because of any encroachment on their territory, and because that encroachment is then seen as an attack on nature itself by these creatures, and they rarely tolerate people inside their glades. Now, considering that there's a well-known joke, popular among children of Tamriel, that goes, "Guess what? Spriggan butt." I have no idea what the context of the joke is, but it's a joke that's apparently popular with children on Tamriel. I personally speculate that children at the very least do not fear these woodland spirits to any great extent, since there are no jokes about, for example, werewolf butts to my knowledge, meaning that perhaps in children's stories, the Spriggan isn't really presented as a big threat, but rather as a good-natured protector of nature. While adults generally tend to fear the Spriggans to a greater degree, especially travelers traveling through the woods. Alchemists, on the other hand, value Spriggans. Or more correctly, they rather value the ingredients that Spriggan bodies provide, as they provide quite a lot of useful ingredients for potions. Like primarily taproot, but also belladonna berries, heartwood, Spriggan sap, primal sproutling and more. In other words, a treasure trove for many alchemists. And once a year, Spriggans tend to shed their branches and their leaves, which are called the Spriggan's veil when shed, and these are valued by mages and herbalists alike because they are thought to be useful in druid practices and to have a symbolic meaning. And there's even a witches circle, the Glenmariel Weird, that are believed to use Spriggan sap in their tattoo ink, in hope that the one who has the tattoos may find a deeper bond with nature through nature's protectors. Now, on a final note, Spriggans actually have a language that's unique to them, although in Daggerfall we see that this language can be learned and can be used to calm Spriggans. And some scholars believe that Spriggans actually cannot behave in an intelligent manner and that they are creatures who act purely on instinct, attacking travelers and the people of Tamriel indiscriminately. But that's decidedly not true, as we know that not only can Spriggans learn and speak Tamrielic, as we have several examples in the games, they can even negotiate and reason. One time that this happens is in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, where you can speak to one of them. In that game you can find a Spriggan that can tell you that it killed people in the woods who have destroyed her seedlings. It then asks what the player would do if someone killed his seedlings, and then tells the player that it wishes no ill will upon the player, and that if the woodsman who destroyed their seedlings handle the woods with more care in the future, she could let them live in peace. This shows that not only do they try to protect nature, but even more importantly, this interaction also shows that Spriggans have a certain level of intelligence, the capability of reason, emotion and negotiation. So based on that, it would be hard to argue that they are stupid and act only on instinct, as they are clearly more intelligent than that. And that is about all I can say about the Spriggans, and I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this video and that I managed to teach you something new about the Elder Scrolls universe today. And if I did, consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video, as that's how the YouTube algorithm decides what content is worthy and what content is not. And with that said, it's time to thank my top Patreon supporters: Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, King Chris 20, Steve G, Volcure of Argonia, RB Dash, His Soul, Lexicon, Ranger, Komodo, Rakai and Sword of Bushido. It's thanks to these people and all the others on screen, so my YouTube members and my Patreon subscribers, that this channel stays afloat, and for that I am very grateful. That said, I will see all of you in the next lore video. Bye bye.